We just heard the Four Preps with Down by the Station, a number 13 hit in 1959, one of several well-remembered chart hits for the group. And we've got a member of the Four Preps on the phone with us right now. He has a new memoir, and I'll tell you, the title alone sells the book, I think.
I hope so.
It's Icons, Idols, and Idiots of Hollywood, My Adventures in America's First Boy Band. Bruce Belland of the Four Preps joins us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. I hasten to point out whenever they mention that title that most of the idiots I wrote about in the book are the four headstrong young guys from Hollywood High who did some real foolish things on the Dick Clark Show and American Bandstand. So a lot of the idiocy belongs to these four young guys from Hollywood High. But there are some other idiots as well in the record industry and so forth. But anyhow, read the book, you'll find out who they are.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to take you right back to the very beginning of your showbiz aspirations. And I think it begins with the most glamorous paper route of all time, is what it sounds like.
When I was 10 years old, I grew up until I was 10 in Chicago, and then my father, who was a fundamentalist minister, accepted the pastorhood of the West Hollywood Community Church, and suddenly this kid from Chicago who'd had a dream since he was age 4 about being a singer and making records lived 15 minutes from the Capitol Tower in West Hollywood. And we were a very much blue-collar, working-class community, but we were butted right up against Beverly Hills. The border of Beverly Hills was about 3 blocks from my front door. And so when I was 14, I talked my way into getting a paper out on what they call Stars Row in Beverly Hills, which would be Rodeo, Cannon, and Beverly Drive, between Sunset and Santa Monica. And my customers were, oh boy, Lucille Ball, Jimmy Stewart, Harpo Marx, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Jimmy Durante, Gene Kelly, so many of the greats. And it was that, David, that kind of really fostered and fueled the ambition for being in show business I already had in Chicago, but now I'm up where show business happens on the West Coast. So that movie star route that I had really kind of fueled my ambition when I saw the lavish lifestyles that these stars were living. I mean, I delivered newspapers to Ira Gershwin. One day I saw he had a garden party for 100 people in his backyard, which looked like a ballpark, and a full orchestra and so forth. So I grew up watching how these stars lived and how they functioned, and I just wanted it more than ever.
You say you wanted to make records, but the Four Preps were also known for their comedy. So were there ambitions to be a comedian, or was it just more music at first?
Interestingly enough, it was music because my mother was a gospel radio singer and played the piano and conducted the choir and was a voice coach. So music every day, sitting next to her on the piano bench from age 4 onward for at least an hour a day, singing, vocalizing, learning how to proper vocal technique and so forth. So music was the start of my ambitions and what I focused on. But the minute we formed the Four Preps at Hollywood High School, I'm standing on stage at 5'6", and our bass is 6'5", so right away you got comedy. I'm a hambo, and I mean I had a lot of Jerry Lewis when we first started. So we were absolutely determined, David, to be entertainers, not just singers. And I talk about that quite a bit in the book, how we really focused on comedy. Good, fearless, sometimes very high-energy slapstick comedy, and then turning around and giving people goosebumps with a well-sung song. So, yes, music started out as the primary interest for me, but very quickly we got joined up with music and tried our best to have a well-rounded act with both elements, comedy and music.
It's interesting, that time period when you first signed with Capitol is 1956, correct?
Yeah.
So the Four Preps are straddling almost 2 different worlds, the burgeoning world of rock and roll and then the established pop world.
This is interesting. You should point that out. We were very much a transitional group. Here's a perfect example. Our first hit was 26 Miles. It was the B-side of the record when it was released, and somebody flipped it over and it became a hit. But on that first release with 26 Miles on the B-side, the A-side was a song from The Music Man, the musical that was about to open, in which Capitol had invested a lot of money. It was a song called It's You from The Music Man. We did it with a 20-piece swing band led by Billy May. They promised us at Capitol that if we would finish the A-side from the Music Man in time to give us some time left over for the session, we could cut our little silly song about Catalina on the B-side. So we finished It's You from the Music Man in an hour. We leaned in and got it done because we wanted to cut our song. All the 20 musicians packed up their horns, all these super cool guys in the aviator sunglasses, left the studio, and in walked, I swear to you, David, 5 hillbillies from Bakersfield. There was a country band led by a guy named Country Joe Mathis, who invented, among other things, the double-neck guitar. He was a genius on every stringed instrument in the world. And we been told by Capitol, you want to do your silly B-side, bring in whoever you want. We'll send the big band home, save some money. So we got these 5 guys who we'd seen on a local television show, on a country music show, and got them to come in from Bakersfield and sat down with our guitars and taught them 26 miles and cut it in about an hour. And, you know, it was going to be the B-side, as I say, and thank God, a disc jockey. I love you guys that play our music. A disc jockey turned it over one night and played the B-side, and the switchboard lit up, and he called the Capitol Tower and said, you guys are on the wrong side of the song. But transitional, yeah, a 20-piece Billy May arrangement on one side and 5 hillbillies from Bakersfield on the B-side.
The Four Preps with 26 Miles, Santa Catalina, a number 2 hit in 1958. Bill Belland of the Four Preps joins us today. That song goes all the way to number 2. Did your life change overnight because of the success of that song?
Oh boy, yeah, it did it ever. You know, it was called pinch yourself moment when we got a call out the road and said your record's going to be tuned next week. You know, doggone it, we never made it. We never made it to number 1. And one of my best lifelong friends is David Somerville from the Diamonds, and they had Little Darlin', and they never made it to number 1 because of Elvis Don't Be Cruel. We didn't make it to number 1 because of the Everly Brothers. All I Have to Do Is Dream. So we sat at number 2 behind them for several weeks. But yeah, you know, I mean, immediately we started spending the money before it ever came in. I bought a Corvette off the showroom floor for cash, and we were kids from a blue-collar working-class community, David. I mean, Glenn Larson of our group, his widowed mother was a waitress that worked at night at a restaurant up on Sunset Boulevard. Marv was an orphan being raised by his grandmother, his disabled grandmother. My dad didn't make, the pastors don't make a lot of money. So we were really strivers, and the minute we started hitting a peak, we went out and spent it. I'm telling you, we lived it up. As you know, we've been waiting for so long and dreaming about it. When it happened, we took advantage of it, believe me.
That was Ricky Nelson along with the Four Preps on the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. We're talking with Bruce Belland of the Four Preps today, and I know that Ricky Nelson went to Hollywood High, and so did you guys. Is that how you met up with Ricky?
Well, what actually happened when I started at Hollywood, as I say in the book, Icons, Idols, and Idiots of Hollywood, my press agent said, you got to mention it 5 times in every show. And anyhow, when I started at Hollywood High, I had, as I said in the book, I was used to seeing movie stars on my paper route in Beverly Hills, and, you know, celebrities, but I wasn't used to seeing a naked one standing next to me in the boys' locker room. But there next to me was David Nelson, and their show had just hit and was really huge. And I introduced myself. We became fast buddies. He was a quarterback on the junior varsity, and I ran on the track team. So I knew David quite a bit, and their home on Camino Palmero was a beautiful white colonial home with a pool and a basketball court. It was about 4 blocks from the Hollywood High campus. So I finally charmed my way into getting invited by David to come up and shoot some baskets and take a dip in their pool, and then go back down to Sunset Boulevard and hitchhike home to our little 1,200 square foot home in West Hollywood. But through David, I met Ricky, and my senior year at Hollywood High, I got elected head cheerleader, and I screwed around so much with the football games and skipping class to test the PA system and so forth that they set me back a semester. So David Nelson and all my other buddies, Glenn and everybody, graduated, and I had to stay an extra semester, which turned out to be great because that's when Ricky Nelson came in, and David Nelson had told, look, when you get to Hollywood High, you want any answers about what's going on, talk to Bruce Belland. He knows the whole setup there. So Ricky sought me out the first day, and, hey, what classes should I take? And that sort of started our friendship.
And I would imagine you probably met all of the great rock and roll stars of the day.
on the road. Absolutely. I mean, the first tour we took was with Jerry Lee Lewis and Roy Hamilton and Bobby Helms and the Silhouettes. So we mixed with them all, and we were these. You got to understand that these were people we idolized. I mean, we sit around the radio when Top 40 came in at Hollywood High and listened. We could memorize every song, and now suddenly we're on tour with these guys, talking to them backstage. So it was a very heady experience. We were not four very sophisticated kids. We came from rather poor backgrounds, and so the whole thing to us was just unreal. I mean, it was a Wizard of Oz time.
Yeah. But you also got acceptance from that older generation, like a Bing Crosby or even Frank Sinatra.
You know, we did, and I think one of the reasons, it's funny, I was doing an interview recently with someone who said, he said, my grandmother went out and bought your record, and I didn't have any idea you were. I'm 12 years old, and she brought it home. And she said the reason she bought it is because you boys dressed so nicely. And, of course, we were always called clean cut. I mean, clean cut, in every interview about us, the word clean cut was always there, milk-fed, clean cut kids from Hollywood High. So we had that image, and why not? I mean, when we first became popular, the group was composed of a preacher's son, two Mormons, and a bashful jock. So it took us a while to get sophisticated, but we got going on it.
Right. So the appearance was wholesome, but we mentioned this comedy aspect, and you, in a way, you kind of started a trend, I suppose, of groups imitating other groups. I guess you did in concert, and then someone got the bright idea to release More Money for You and Me as a single?
Yeah, let me tell you what happened. When I was 14 and 15, as I say, our little parsonage was about 3 blocks from the Sunset Strip. And on Saturday night, when my parents would go to bed early, because tomorrow, Sunday, is a big day for a preacher, so they get to bed early, I would sneak out the back door. My room was at the very back of our little bungalow, and I rigged the window so I could sneak out and run up to Sunset and prowl the nightclubs. 14, 15 years old, I'd go to the backstage door and talk my way in. I want to be a singer. I want to be in show business. I'd give anything to see the show. Can I come in? And pretty soon they all got to know me. Well, one of the acts that I saw very early on that I absolutely idolized, and I still do, was an act called the Will Maston Trio. And that was composed of Will Maston and his brother, Sammy Davis Sr., and his nephew, Sammy Davis Jr. And I would watch Sammy on stage sing the hell out of a song, tap dance, and all of a sudden he'd turn around and be doing Tony Bennett. Or he'd be imitating somebody with hilarious material and these uncanny imitations. Yeah, Sammy, well, come on, Sammy could do everything. He made a record, Because of You, right. And every 4 bars he did a different celebrity's voice. So he was the best. To me, David, he and Bobby Darin were the two greatest performers I've ever seen on stage.
Yeah, I love them.
And that's kind of also, David, what planted the seed. I want to be an entertainer. I want to do that. I want to get people to laugh and see if we can sound like these groups. And I will tell you, we worked long hours on those imitations. We sat around and practiced over and over. Okay, David, you try the lead. Let me see. It was a great experience and a great fun for us, and we took great pride in it. And frankly, the follow-up record, the Big Draft medley, I think is a better, funnier record, but it was More Money that was the hit, and that certainly established us. Suddenly, we were very big in the college concert market, which was a whole new market, and when that in-person album came out with the concert performance, our ratings shot up. We bought our own car, and I should say our own plane, and that was the beginning of a whole new phase of our career, those imitations.
I'm just curious if you ever heard back from the Kingston Trio or the Four Freshmen about being parodied.
Well, two things. When we released More Money for You and Me, the original concert version, we imitated the Four Freshmen, who I idolized. And Ross Barber of the Freshmen became a good friend of mine. And he called from the road at one point when More Money was being played and he said, "Hey, you cut us out. The reason was the concert version in the album was over 5 minutes long. As you know, Top 40 radio, 3 minutes or you're dead. So they cut out a lot of them and took the Freshmen out. So I was disappointed about that. Spent the rest of my life apologizing to Ross. And I did hear, I never had any confirmation, but I did hear from a couple of people that Dion wasn't real pleased because for a while in concert when our record hit, he'd come out and sing Teenager in love, and when he got the teenager in, the whole audience would go, jail! So he wasn't tickled to death about that.
Well, it's as I mentioned, it became sort of a genre unto itself. I don't know if you know about this, but there was a group in England who did something similar.
The Barron Knights.
Barron Knights, yeah. They
copied us. I've got 3 or 4 lovely emails. Well, in the olden days, there were snail mail letters from him saying how much they admired the Preps and did I mind if they did some of our material and some of our songs. And then they did a takeoff of their own. And they did a song from one of our albums called Come to the Dance, which is a Mexican folk song. So through the course of their career, they did 2 or 3 numbers of ours, but most particularly they kind of borrowed our idea of the imitations. And as I say, the lovely gentleman that was the leader of the group contacted me and said, I hope you don't mind. We're kind of doing your act. I didn't mind at all. I thought it was a compliment.
Well, speaking of the Brits, you had this record that seemed like it was going to be a smash called A Letter to the Beatles, and then...
You're going to break my heart, aren't you?
And then all of a sudden it was gone.
Yeah, well, we hadn't had a hit for 2 or 3 years, and what was happening, David, is that all of us were kind of branching out and doing other things. Glenn was selling scripts, Ed was producing and writing hits for other people, Marv was invested in the stock market. I was doing voiceovers at Disney for a lot of their movies and so forth. So we were kind of spread out a little thin and weren't really working as hard as we should have on our career recording and getting another hit single. And then along came the Beatles. Well, as you know from our albums, we pitted everything in the world from Mother Teresa to cannabis and Fidel Castro. So
right.
Every fad, every trend that came along, we'd do a little satire, a little parody on it. So when the Beatles got out, we said, let's kid the Beatles and say, here's a girl that wrote them a fan letter, said, I love you, I will love you forever. And they wrote back and said, well, that's cool, thank you very much, but send 25 cents for an autographed picture. Well, of course, you wouldn't be able to get an autographed picture for that today.
Right.
But it came out. Once again, we were known for being kind of wise guys and kidding whatever came along. And the disc jockeys, I can't tell you, the first week it came out, it was like 80 with a bullet on, and everyone said, oh my God, the Preps are back. They did it again with tongue in cheek. They got themselves another hit. How great is this? Thanks, guys. And we're on the road. Oh God, I never will forget. In Oklahoma City, we're doing an amusement park there, and I get a call from our producer at the Capitol Tower, and they said, "You're not going to be very happy." I said, "What?" I said, "Well, how could I not be happy? We're 80 with a bullet the first weekend of the month." He said, "Yeah, but yesterday we got a call at the Capitol Tower from a man named Brian Epstein." And he said, we, the royal we have heard the 4 Preps new recording, and we are not amused. And threatened to file, this is crazy, you're going to file a defamation suit against us and against Capitol Records, which was their label too.
Yeah.
Well, I naively thought, because I'm always the big thinker and the dreamer, I thought, well, hell, we've been with Capitol for 13 years. They're not going to drop us in favor of the Beatles. I should have realized that we hadn't had a hit for 3 years. We were on the way down. The Beatles were on the way up. So the corporate decision was made in 24 hours. That record was pulled off the shelf of every record store. All the radio stations got cease and desist orders not to play the record anymore. And it disappeared, and that was our last chart record.
My girl fell in love.
The group disbands in the late 60s. What prompted you to reform the 4 Preps in I believe it was the 80s when you started back up?
89, that's correct.
Wow.
So we disbanded, and it disbanded amicably, not like some groups where we all went our separate ways, in ill temper. That was not the case at all. We all loved each other and said, hey, we all got other good things going. Been a great 13-year ride. Forget about it. And then along in 1989, it was Glenn's 50th birthday, and by then he had gone on the Capitol and produced all kinds of hit television shows, Knight Rider and McCloud and To Catch a Thief and so forth. And he had a big birthday party at his mansion in Holmby Hills. It had a bowling alley, it had a movie theater, the whole thing, and everybody, Roy Rogers was there, Tommy Lasorda was there, David Hasselhoff,
sure.
Jacqueline Smith was there, Dennis Weaver was there, all these stars, and all the 4 guys from the original group. And Dick Clark was there. Dick came over and he says, "Come on, guys, you're all here together. It's been 20 years. Get up. Come on, sing something." So we got up with Les Brown's band, who kind of faked it behind us, and we sang a couple of songs. And we got off stage, and everybody was clamoring and going crazy. And I'm standing backstage kind of cooling off, and I hear a very familiar voice behind me say, "I smell money." And I turned around, and it was Uncle Dick Clark. And he said, "If you guys don't put this group back together and go out," he said, "you know how many people are starving to hear the kind of harmony you guys sang? You got to do this." So the next day I called Ed Cobb, who was a big shot record producer by then, and I said, "You want to do this?" He said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And when I got out from behind the recording console and a desk, I want to go back on stage. He said, "I got a great idea. Let's enlist Jim Pike of the Letterman. He's looking for something to do, and we'll get Dave Somerville from the Diamonds and form a supergroup." So in '89, we reformed the Four Preps with Ed Cobb and myself from the original group, David Somerville, original lead singer of the Diamonds, and Jim Pike, original lead singer of the Letterman. We did that for 2 years, then Jim Pike retired, and we got Jim Yester from the association and worked together for another 8 years as the Four Preps with that foursome.
And you had a big PBS. You had a couple. You were on twice on PBS.
Yeah, I mean, that Magic Moments thing, that was funny because that was strictly a pickup group. Those four guys that sang in that show never sung together on a stage before that, never did after that. The PBS called, and I called Glenn, and, he was a billionaire by then. I said, "Glenn, you want to do this PBS?" He said, "Oh, man, my tux won't fit anymore. I don't know." I said, come on, let's do it. He said, "All right, okay." So we got together and rehearsed our asses off. We didn't want to make fools of ourselves. And we got Jim Yester, who I was working at that time, and David Somerville. So that weird foursome of Jim Yester, David Somerville, and I, the three of us were still performing together as a threesome at that point. And we grabbed Glenn out of retirement and got up on PBS and sang a couple of our hits. And about 6 months later, I started to get phone calls saying, "Wow, we saw you guys on PBS. When can we sign you? When can you come back here on tour and make some PAs?" So I thought, that's interesting. 2007, a fellow that I knew that had the second or third incarnation of the Crew Cuts for many years, a very good friend of mine named Bob Duncan, he called me one day and he said, "Why don't you put the Four Preps back together again? There's all these retirement communities in Florida and Arizona who'd love to hear us." And I did. I put it back together, got all the old arrangements out. Bob got two great singers to join him and me. And from 2007 to 2019, we did 25 to 30 performances, mostly down in Florida, as I say, in the retirement community and at various venues around the country.
Well, all of these stories and more are in the new book, Icons, Idols, and Idiots of Hollywood. This is mention number 3, My Adventures in America's First Boy Band, by our guest today, Bruce Belland. And where can people, you have your own website, obviously.
Yeah, Bruce Belland, BELLAND, BruceBelland.com. If you go there and click on the Santa Claus hat, it'll tell you how to order the book. So we said the title 3 times. My publicist said 5 times. So Icons, Idols, Idiots to Hollywood, number 4. Icons, Idiots to Hollywood, number 5. There we go. We got the 5. And you gave me a cue before I didn't pick up on it, talking about Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and how we appeared with them on an amazing special when we didn't even have a hit yet. And I spent a week at the side of Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby. So that, again, is in the book. All these things are. But, we had some fun, I'll tell you that.
Thank you so much for appearing on the show. It's been a great thrill talking to you, and I wish you all the best in the future with the book.
Thank you, my man. You're 53. I can't believe you'd be interested in a codger like me, but I'm glad you were.
Well, I'm a codger at heart.
I love it. Thanks a lot, David. Good
Take
talking
care.
to you, buddy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.